Abulafia. 1. The Man. One of the most important early figures in Kabbalah meditation is Rabbi Abraham Abulafia. Not only was he party to many important traditions, but he also wrote voluminously regarding them. Indeed, very little would be known about many of these traditions if not for his writings. Unfortunately, however, very few of his writings have ever been published. Most exist only in manuscript form, either in major libraries or in the hands of Kabbalists who refuse to publicize the fact. Finding and correctly identifying Abulafia's manuscripts has been a difficult task, since many of these were catalogued incorrectly or not catalogued at all. In a number of cases, important manuscripts were tracked down by word of mouth and discovered in the libraries of individuals who had no idea as to their content. Although much important work has been done by library scientists, manuscriptologists, and other scholars, the study of Abulafia's writings requires much basic research into the largely unexplored world of ancient manuscripts. An important problem in working with manuscripts is the fact that many were written in ancient scripts that are almost illegible to the modern reader. Others were privately made, written hurriedly by individuals with poor handwriting. When added to the fact that their basic script may now be obsolete, the reading of these manuscripts becomes next to impossible. Much study has to be done to decipher the alphabets of many manuscripts, and in some cases, relevant portions had to be transcribed letter by letter before they could be read. One reason why Abulafia's works were not published was undoubtedly related to the general reticence surrounding the publication of materials dealing with meditation and the mystical arts. But another reason was the controversy that surrounded Abulafia as a person. In many places in his writings, Abulafia indicates that he is a prophet, and in others, he hints that he has a special mission. There are also many veiled allusions that could be interpreted to reflect messianic delusions on his part. For the most part, however, these are ambiguous, and it is probable that when he speaks of himself as the Anointed One, he means that he is enlightened, and not that he is the promised Messiah. In a number of places, he speaks of the prophet experience as one resembling being anointed with oil. In no place did Abulafia ever attempt to actually implement a messianic role for himself, so this interpretation appears highly probable. All of his alleged claims, however, did not escape the notice of the religious leaders of his generation. His strongest opposition came from the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret. 5 years older than Abulafia, the Rashba had been appointed rabbi in Barcelona in 1280, and he enjoyed a reputation as the leading sage of his time. Even today, his Talmudic commentaries are counted among the most important, and his responsa are considered basic to Jewish law. It is evident that while Abulafia was in Sicily, the Rashba mounted a scathing attack against him. This involved his own letters as well as messages that he influenced the letters of other congregations to send to Sicily, denouncing Abulafia. In the early 1290s, the Rashba wrote a responsum to the community of Saragosta, Abulafia's birthplace, regarding a self-proclaimed prophet in Avila, possibly a disciple of Abulafia. In it, he alludes to his earlier attacks on Abulafia, denouncing him in no uncertain terms. This attack by the leading figure of the generation was enough to virtually guarantee that the religious establishment would shun and ignore Abulafia's works. In some ways, however, the intensity of the attack is understandable, considering the status of the Kabbalah at the time. The Zohar had not yet been published, and although the Bahir had been published in 1175, it was far from being universally accepted. A very strong school opposed the Kabbalah, denouncing its teachings as approaching heresy. This is best exemplified by a statement by the Rashbash, Rabbi Shlomo ben Shimon Duran, a century later, who wrote, "The Christians believe in the 3, while the Kabbalists believe in the 10. As a strong defender of the Kabbalah, the Rashba might have seen Abulafia's statements as being very dangerous to its healthy growth. Abulafia was very much hurt by the Rashba's attacks, and it was as a reply to them that he wrote his famous epistle, Vizot LeYehuda, and this is to Judah. The Rashba's responsum was taken up by another major Kabbalist, Rabbi Judah Chait, who lived around the time of the Spanish Inquisition. The entire attack against Abulafia was then expanded upon by the Yashar of Kandia, Rabbi Yosef Shlomo del Medigo, one of the most important defenders of the Kabbalah. In view of all this, one would expect that Abulafia and his writings would be relegated to the dustbin of history and not have any influence whatsoever on the Kabbalah tradition. This, however, turns out to be far from true, and his works are quoted, albeit guardedly, by many of the most important Kabbalists. Thus, the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, dean of the Tzfat school, considers Abulafia to be an authority on the pronunciation of divine names, and quotes a lengthy section from his Or HaSechel, Light of the Intellect. In the unpublished fourth section of his Sha'arei Kedusha, Gates of Holiness, Rabbi Chaim Vital cites Abulafia's methods as being techniques for meditation. He speaks of his Chaye Olam Haba, Life of the Future World, as if it were a well-known book in Kabbalistic circles, and quotes at length from his Sefer HaCheshek, Book of Passion. Another major figure, the Radbaz, Rabbi David Abu Zimra, mentions Abulafia's works in a positive context. The final word regarding the acceptability of any Hebraic text is usually given to the Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai. Quoting a number of attacks against Abulafia, the Chida then cites the fact that his works have been accepted by the greatest Kabbalists and have been found to be beneficial. In view of this opinion, the general trend among knowledgeable Kabbalists has been to accept the teachings of Abulafia, even though his methods are considered to be very advanced and dangerous. His manuscripts have been copied and circulated among many Kabbalists, and they form an important part of the curriculum in some secret schools. While the personality of Abulafia may be questioned, it is generally recognized that he was in possession of authentic traditions, and that he recorded them faithfully and accurately. Sources. From the Rashba. There are many frauds whom I have heard and seen. One is the disgusting creature, may the name of the wicked rot, whose name is Abraham Abulafia. He proclaimed himself as a prophet and Messiah in Sicily, and enticed many people with his lies. Through the mercy of God, I was able to slam the door in his face, both with my own letters and with those of many congregations. If not for this, he would have actually been able to begin. He invented many false ideas, totally foolishness, which resembles high wisdom, and with this he could have done much damage. Making use of a certain consistence, he places his mind on an idea for many days and comes up with elaborate numerical exercises, gematriot, involving both scripture and the words of our sages. From Rabbi Judah Chait. I have also seen books written by a scholar by the name of Rabbi Abraham Abulafia. In his foolishness and pride, he calls himself a prophet. But it is taught that since the temple has been destroyed, prophecy has been given over to the insane. His books are filled with his own inventions, imaginations, and falsehood. He may have written Or HaSechel, Light of the Intellect, but he actually walks in darkness. He wrote the Moreh HaMoreh, Guide to the Guide, as a Kabbalistic commentary on Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed. How idiotic it is to invent a Kabbalistic commentary to the Guide. Maimonides would never even dream of such an interpretation. He also wrote a book of the name, this is Chaye Olam Haba, Life of the Future World, as a commentary on the name of 72. He writes the entire book as a series of circles so as to confuse those who look at it, as if this would make up for its lack of true content. He filled this book with word manipulations made up by his own deficient mind. From the Chida. Chaye Olam Haba, Life of the Future World, is a book written by Rabbi Abraham Abulafia, in circles, concerning the name of 72. I have seen a manuscript of it, written on parchment. The Rashba, in chapter 544 of his Responsa, and Rabbi Yashar of Kandia, in his Mitzaref LaChochmah, Purifier of Wisdom, denounce him like one of worthless and worse. Still, I must tell the truth. I saw a great rabbi, one of the major masters of the mysteries, of great reputation. According to his words, there is no question that he made use of this book and benefited greatly from it. 2. Growth of a prophet. Abulafia included considerable autobiographical material in his writings, and much is therefore known about his life, even though there are some important blank spots. From all this material, we obtain a picture of a sincere, inspired individual who also possessed many human failings. He was born in the year 1240. This does not appear very significant until we realize that on the Hebrew calendar, which counts from the birth of Adam, this was the year 5000, literally the beginning of a new millennium. Abulafia was very much aware of this distinction, and in a number of places cites it as proof that he was destined for a special mission. In his autobiography, Abulafia speaks about many of his disciples. The most important of these was Rabbi Joseph Gikatalia, who later was to become one of the greatest Kabbalists of that period. 8 years younger than Abulafia, it can be ascertained that he came under the influence of Abulafia in the year 1273, when he was 25 years old. Gikatalia's Sha'arei Orah, Gates of Light, became one of the most important Kabbalistic classics, and in many places, it reflects the teachings of Abulafia. Another disciple mentioned in the autobiography is a certain Shem Tov of Burgos. We shall meet him again as one of the possible authors of Sha'arei Tzedek, Gates of Righteousness, an important exposition of Abulafia's techniques. It has often been stated that Abulafia was opposed to the Talmud and deficient in its knowledge, but this is an inaccurate conclusion. As a teenager, Abulafia learned scripture, Mishnah, and Talmud from his father, attaining what was then considered an adequate knowledge of these subjects. When the Rashba accused him of being an ignoramus, he replied that he had completed the entire Talmud and had learned how to render decisions in religious law from 2 prominent masters. He also states that he had mastered Chulin, the Talmudic tract that deals with the fine points of the dietary laws, and that which forms the core of traditional rabbinical training. In a number of places, we clearly find that Abulafia held the masters of Talmud in high esteem. Once, he openly states that if not pressed by his disciples, he would rather study the Talmud than write books on the mysteries. Abulafia's earliest study consisted largely of the works of the great Jewish philosophers, and he writes that he originally considered philosophy to be the greatest of all disciplines. Maimonides' famed Guide to the Perplexed remained one of his favorite books, and he was later to write 3 different commentaries on it. Abulafia mentions that he was introduced to the guide by a certain Rabbi Hillel in Capua. This is most certainly Rabbi Hillel of Verona, who lived in Capua between 1260 and 1271. Rabbi Hillel had been a disciple of the famed Rabbi Jonah Gerondi. Rabbi Jonah had been a vehement opponent of Maimonides' guide, but toward the end of his life, he made a public confession regretting this opposition. Rabbi Hillel followed his master and also became a staunch advocate of Maimonides' teachings. When Shlomo Petit, a leading Kabbalist from Akko, attempted to reintroduce a ban against the guide, Rabbi Hillel became one of its most important defenders. Besides this, Rabbi Hillel is best known for his book Tagmulei HaNefesh, Reward of the Soul, written in 1290 in the city of Forli. It was from Rabbi Hillel that Abulafia gained a strong positive impression of Maimonides' teachings, in direct opposition to many important Kabbalists of that period. Besides this, Abulafia was thoroughly familiar with the mystical works from the Talmudical period, such as the Bahir, which he calls the greatest of all Kabbalah texts. In at least one place, he uses a term prominent in the Zohar, indicating that he might also have had some access to that body of literature, even though it had not yet been published. It is of great significance that Abulafia also refers to the Hechalot, which we have discussed in the previous chapter. Although he was familiar with this text, in no place does he mention the actual use of its methods, but instead advocates a different system entirely. This would appear to indicate that, like the Ari, he realized that the techniques described in the Echalot require a system of purification that was no longer in existence. Another reason may be the fact that Abulafia considered himself a follower of the way of the Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Formation, a system that he considered unique and different than other Kabbalistic teachings. In one place, he discussed the Kabbalistic school utilizing the 10 sefirot, and clearly states that the way of the Sefer Yetzirah is different and higher, involving the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet rather than the 10 numbers. There is no question that the Sefer Yetzirah played a most important role in Abulafia's career. In his autobiographical sketch, he writes that he considered his initiation into the mysteries of the Sefer Yetzirah as the major turning point in his life. Elsewhere, he writes that he had studied the Sefer Yetzirah with 12 of its major commentaries, both philosophical and Kabbalistic. His master in the Sefer Yetzirah was Rabbi Baruch Torgami, who also apparently influenced Rabbi Isaac of Akko. Rabbi Baruch wrote a book, Maftechot HaKabbalah, Keys of Kabbalah, a commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah involving numerical manipulations, gematria, in a style very much like that of Abulafia. Besides this, it appears that Abulafia learned a good deal of the mystical tradition from Rabbi Baruch. The surname Torgami would indicate that Rabbi Baruch came from Turkey, Togarma. This would imply that the mystical tradition may have been preserved there in an unbroken tradition. This is quite likely, since at the time Turkey had a Jewish community that had flourished there since the time of Alexander the Great. There has been much confusion regarding the temptations that Abulafia mentions in his autobiographical sketch. A key is provided by his statement that, for 15 years, the Satan was at my right hand to mislead me. In a number of places, Abulafia indicates that Satan, Satan, has a numerical value of 359, the same as that of Zera Lavan, meaning white seed. This white seed clearly refers to semen, as Abulafia clearly states elsewhere. It would therefore appear that the Satan indicates sexual temptation, most probably involving masturbation. This is supported by his poem at the beginning of Chaye Olam Haba, where he speaks of his body defiled with seed, worthy of death, and apparently guilty of murder. This is an allusion to and Onan, who died for spilling their seed in vain, and to the Talmudic statement that one who emits semen in vain is likened to a murderer. This is particularly significant, since it is well established in Kabbalistic teachings that masturbation is one of the worst of sins, as clearly stated in the Zohar. The main task of the mystic is to use the intellect and imagination to reach the highest spiritual levels, and this process is totally disrupted when one uses his imagination to conjure up sexual fantasies while masturbating. A later mystic, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, considered it one of his greatest accomplishments that he was able to discover a general rectification, tikkun haklali, to undo the spiritual damage caused by masturbation. Although Abulafia clearly recognized the primacy of the Hebrew language in his mystical system, he also recognized the value of other languages and cultures. In a number of places, he makes use of foreign terms to prove a point, and even incorporates them into his numerical calculations. Once, he makes use of the Arabic or Indian number system to prove a point. He also had discussions with Christian mystics, and praises them for their insight. In one place, he states, "There is no question that there are individuals among the Christians who know this mystery. They discussed the mysteries with me and revealed that this is unquestionably their opinion, whereupon I judged them to be among the pious of the Gentiles. One need not worry about the fools of any nation, since the Torah was only given to those with intelligence." Abulafia's relationship with the Christians was not confined to debates, nor was he particularly impressed with their theology. In a number of places, he speaks of such Christian ideas as the Trinity and Incarnation as being false. But in what is probably the most dramatic episode in Abulafia's life, he went on a mission to attempt to convert the Pope to Judaism. This Pope was Nicholas III, who, according to historical records, died in Saronno, Italy, on August 22, 1280. This was just a few days before Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. This pope was best known for having established the Vatican as a permanent seat of the papacy, and for sending missionaries to Persia and China. Abulafia came to see him shortly before Rosh Hashanah, and it was only the pope's sudden death that saved him from being burned at the stake. Abulafia himself wrote an autobiographical account of this conversion attempt in his Sefer HaEdut, Book of Testimonies. In this account, he calls himself Raziel, an anonym that he frequently used, this being the name of the angel who taught the mysteries to Adam. Raziel has a numerical value of 248, this being the same as Abulafia's first name, Abraham. As Abulafia himself indicates, this relationship is more than a simple gematria, but it is a mishkal, balance, since both the numerical value and the number of letters in both names are equal. It appears that Abulafia returned to Barcelona shortly after this, since we find him leaving there in 1281. This is particularly significant, since the Rashba, the main opponent of Abulafia, had assumed the post of rabbi in Barcelona in 1280. It may well have been the denunciation on the part of the Rashba that Abulafia refers to when he states that he was captured by Gentiles because of denunciation on the part of the Jews. From Barcelona, Abulafia moved his base of operations to Palmyra, Sicily, and here he wrote his Mitzaref LaSechel, Refinement of the Intellect, in 1282. It was also here that he gained Rabbi Achitov the physician as a disciple. It was to this Rabbi Achitov that the Rashba sent a scathing denunciation of Abulafia's methods. A short time after this, Abulafia moved to Messina, also in Sicily. He calls this city Mi Sinai, meaning from Sinai, possibly indicating that it was a place of revelation. His opposition, however, grew even stronger, and by 1288, he had been forced to move to the tiny island of Comino, near Malta. After this, very little is known of his personal life, although a few of his existent works seem to have been written during this period. An excellent autobiographical account of this last period, couched in apocalyptic language, is found in Abulafia's Sefer Ha'ot, Book of the Sign. Here, Abulafia uses another anonym, Zecharyahu, which also has the same numerical value as Abraham. Sources. Excerpt from Otsar Eden Haganuz. In everything that I have written until now, my main intent was to come to what I will now reveal. I, Abraham Abulafia, the individual mentioned in the introduction, was born in Saragossa, in Aragon, which is in the Kingdom of Spain. Before I was weaned, while I was still an infant suckling milk from the breasts of my mother, I moved to Navarra, some 16 parsangs from the city where I was born, together with my brothers and sisters. I thus grew up on the Ebro River, which passes through both of these cities. I began to read the scriptures with their commentaries, and also learned Hebrew grammar, completing all 24 books of the Bible under the tutelage of my father of blessed memory. It was from him that I also learned the Mishnah and Talmud, and most of my learning was under this instruction. I was 18 years old when he died. I remained in the land of my birth for 2 years after my father passed away. At the age of 20, God's Spirit moved me, and I left, heading straight for the land of Israel by sea and by land. My intent was to reach the land of the Sambatyon, but I did not get further than Akko. Because of the conflict between Ishmael, the Arabs, and Esau, the Christians, I was forced to flee. I left the Holy Land and returned to Europe by way of Greece. It was while passing through Greece that I got married. God then aroused me, and taking along my wife, I set out for the waters of desire, where I could study the Torah. This I found in Capua, a journey of 5 days from Rome. It was here that I found a distinguished sage, philosopher, and master physician by the name of Rabbi Hillel. We became friends, and it was from him that I learned philosophy, which I found very pleasant. Exploring this discipline with all my might, I kept at it day and night. I was not satisfied until I had gone through the entire Guide to the Perplexed many times. In Capua, I also had 4 disciples whom I taught occasionally. They were senseless young men, however, and when they went out to evil ways, I abandoned them. There were also another 10 disciples, but these too did not benefit, and they lost both ways, the first and the second. In Agropoli, there were 4 disciples, but these also did not benefit from my teachings. They had very strange ideas, especially concerning the depths of wisdom and mysteries of the Torah. I did not find any who were worthy that I should even give them the barest hints of the truth. In Rome, there were 2 old men, Rabbi Tzadakia and Rabbi Yeshia, who entered into my covenant. With these I had some success, but they were very old, and they died. In Barcelona I had 2 disciples, one by the name of Rabbi Kalonimus, of blessed memory, an older man who was quite distinguished. The other was a brilliant unmarried man, a distinguished sage and one of the leaders of the community, by the name of Rabbi Yauda, also called Solomon. In Burgos, I taught 2 men, a master and his disciple. The name of the master is Rabbi Moshe Sifno. The disciple is Rabbi Shem Tov, a pleasant young man, but his youth prevented him from mastering the subject. Both he and his master only learned a few external points of the Kabbalah from me. In Medina Theli, there were 2 disciples. One was Samuel the prophet, to whom I taught some Kabbalah. The other was Rabbi Joseph Gigatalia, may God continue to guide him. He had great intelligence, and will undoubtedly have great success if God is with him. I am now in Messina, which is from Sinai, Sinai. Here I found 6 men, and I also brought a 7th along with me. These learned from me for a very short time, each one taking what he could, some much, and some little. They all eventually left me, except for one. He was their leader, and he brought all the others to learn from me. The name of this disciple is Rabbi Saadia ben Yitzchak Sanalmapi, of blessed memory. He was followed by Rabbi Abraham ben Shalom, and then by the latter's son, Yaakov, and then by his friend Yitzchak. These were followed by other acquaintances, until I had 3 disciples on one level, and 4 on a lower level. The 7th disciple was Natroni the Frenchman, of blessed memory, but for various reasons he immediately left us. He was the one who prevented the others from attaining what they could. It was here that some desired things occurred, and there were some normal events, some accidents, and some things that had to take place. When I was 31 years old, in Barcelona, God awakened me from my sleep, and I learned the Sefer Yetzirah with its commentaries. God's hand was upon me, and I wrote books of wisdom, and also some wondrous prophetic books. My soul awakened within me, and a spirit of God touched my mouth. A spirit of holiness fluttered through me, and I saw many fearsome sights and wonders, through signs and miracles. But at the same time, spirits of jealousy gathered around me, and I was confronted with fantasy and error. My mind was totally confused, since I could not find anyone else like me who would teach me the correct path. I was therefore like a blind man, groping around at noon. For 15 years, the Satan was at my right hand to mislead me. All this time, I was driven mad from what my eyes saw. But I was able to keep the Torah and seal in the 2nd curse for 15 years, until God granted me wisdom and counsel. God was thus with me from the year 1, 5001 equals 1241, until the year 45, 5045 equals 1285, protecting me from all misfortune. At the beginning of the year Elijah, Eliah equals 46, that is, 5046, or the end of 1285 CE, God had mercy on me and brought me to the Holy Palace. It is at this time that I completed this book, Otsar Eden Haganuz, which was written here in Messina. It was written for the above-mentioned Saadia, the first of the 7 mentioned earlier. Seeing the affection with which he attached himself to me, I wrote this for him so that he should remember what he learned from me, since forgetfulness is rampant. When he has it, I know that it will also help his above-mentioned companions, since it is most probable that they will also learn from it. I realize that if not for various accidents and fantasies, they would have never left me. The fantasies that caused them to leave me and keep away from me are precisely the ones that I myself once had. God helped me to stand my ground, and withstanding the test enlightened my heart, since because of them I guarded my mouth and tongue. I kept my lips from speaking and my heart from thinking, and I returned to the proper place. I continued to keep the covenant, recognizing and perceiving what was hidden from me at the time. And I praise the name of the Lord, my God and God of my fathers, who did not withdraw his love and truth during all these times. Excerpt from Mitzaref LaSechel, Conversion of the Pope. This is the Book of Testimonies, Sefer HaEdut, the 4th commentary written by Raziel, an anonym of Abulafia, the 3rd book of the volume. The first was the Book of the Upright, Sefer HaYashar, written in the city of Mount Patre in Greece in the year 5039, 1279. The author was then 39 years old, and this was the 9th year of his prophecy. Until that year, he did not write any prophetic books, even though he wrote many other books of wisdom, some dealing with the deepest mysteries of the Kabbalah. In that 9th year, God aroused him to go to Rome, as he commanded him in Barcelona in those years. On the way, he passed through Tarni, where he was imprisoned by the Gentiles because he had been denounced by the Jews. A miracle occurred, and he escaped. He then settled in Capua for a short time. In the 10th year, after he had left Barcelona, he wrote a 2nd book, which is called the Book of Life, Sefer HaChaim. In the 5th month after Nisan, the 11th month after Tishrei, that is, the month of Av, July, in the 10th year, he came to Rome. He had planned to appear before the Pope on the day before the Hebrew New Year. The Pope was then in Saronno, a day's journey from Rome, and he instructed the gatekeepers that if Raziel should come to speak to him in the name of Judaism, he should be detained and should not be granted an audience. They were given instructions to take him out of the city and burn him at the stake. The wood was already prepared near the inner gate of the city. Raziel was informed of this, but he paid no heed to those who told him. He meditated, hitboded, and saw wonders, and at that time he wrote them down in his Book of Testimonies. It would be a testimony between him and God that he had saved him from his enemies. On the day that he was to see the Pope, he was given 2 mouths. When he entered the outer gate of the city, a messenger greeted him and informed him that on the previous night, the one who had sought to kill him had suddenly died, as if from a plague. One was killed that night, and the other was saved. In Rome, he was then imprisoned by the Little Brothers, Franciscans, and he remained in their academy for 28 days. He finally went free on the 1st of Cheshvan, October 18th, 1240. I write this to tell the praise of God, and his miracles and wonders with Raziel and his true servants. Excerpt from Sefer HaOt. Zecharyahu. And God said to Zecharyahu, an anonym for Abulafia, the proclaimer, "Raise your voice, your tongue, with a pen, and with 3 fingers write the words of this book." And God was with him to help him, and Zecharyahu wrote all that God commanded him. He went quickly, declaring and announcing the living words of God to the Jews, circumcised in flesh, but uncircumcised in heart. But the poor to whom he was sent, and for whom he was revealed, did not pay attention to his coming. They began to speak about him and his God, saying things that should not be spoken. And God commanded him to speak in his name to the Gentiles, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh. He did this, and they believed in the announcement from God. But they did not return to God, for they believed in their sword and bow, and God had hardened their unclean, uncircumcised hearts. God's anger was then kindled against them, and he had mercy on his people Israel. And he then chose a time and season for the day of the proclamation. And it was on that day God went with joy and gladness, with 7 lamps and 5 bright lights, seeking on all the tops of the mountains. Between the lions and bears, he found a lost sheep, without shepherd, but no lion had torn it, and no bear had eaten it. And God found the top of a high mountain, and its name is Mount Naples. The shepherd of this sheep sat on it for 20 years, until the passing of the time of anger and the instant of rage, during which the shepherd slept. At that time, the God of Israel will awaken the heart of the shepherd, and he will be aroused from his sleep, and he will awaken the hearts that sleep in the dust. The dead will then come to life, and the sheep will come home, never again to be scattered. In the year 5045, 1285, in the 3rd lunar month, that is the month of Kislev, this being the 9th solar month, September, in the 10th cycle, in the 5th year of the cycle, on the 1st of the month, on the 6th day, Friday, God awakened the spirit of Zechariah to review and double his prophetic books, and to complete half of this book. On that day, Zechariah the shepherd began to write wonders. And God sent a physician to his people to heal the pain of their wound by teaching their sages his name. And the sages of wisdom were sick and wounded, with every sickness and wound that is not written in this book of the Torah. And God said to Zechariah the healthy one, "Go, and I will send you to the people who are stricken in heart, to heal their sickness. Take with you the remedy of my name and my remembrance." And God gave a gift of grace and a portion of love in the hands of Zechariah, and he went about in the lands of the nations where Israel is scattered. He began to speak, and as he spoke, he ended. For he called out in the name of the Lord, the everlasting God, from the beginning to the end, walking a straight line, not straying to the right or to the left. But only a few of the sages of Israel wished to hear the wisdom of God, and the excellence of his ways, from his mouth. God appeared to the healthy among them, and asked them to heal the sick in spirit by the word of Zechariah. And those who would deny the highest wisdom stood up, sick and stricken with deadly wounds. They spoke high words against God and his anointed, and against all the healthy ones who had gone along with them, who recognized the depth of their sickness and pursued a cure. The hearts of those who followed melted, and their spirit became weak, and they stopped following those who knew the name and are counted with it. Because of such things, God became angry at those who provoked him and denied his name. He sent one to rebuke them, and his words were a shame and an insult to their name. So they chased him from city to city, from place to place, until he came to the land of Mastina, Malta, to the island of Comino. There he sat for many days against his will. And it was in those days that God said to Zechariah, "Write for you this book, which will go against the sages of Israel in this generation, who boast about that which I do not desire. They say, 'Why should we consider God's name? How will it help us when we utter it? And how will it benefit us if we calculate it?'" 3. Writings. It is not because of his personal life that Abulafia is so fascinating, but because of the remarkable treasure of mystical lore that he has included in his writings. While this tradition was known to other masters of that period, none wrote down more than the barest hints regarding the explicit practices of the Kabbalah. Abulafia himself writes, "No other Kabbalist before me wrote explicit books on this subject." Elsewhere, he states that the earlier authors who did write about this subject made a point of concealing its practices. They did not make it obvious that this was the main point of their books, but only mentioned it in passing. Quote, "But I have made it the main point and root of all that I have ever written." End quote. It apparently was not pride that led Abulafia to do this, but rather a feeling of divine calling. In one place, he states that he was commanded by Elijah and Enoch in a vision to reveal these secrets. According to his calculations, prophecy was destined to return around the year 1285, and his books were intended to teach the methods of attaining this level for those who were worthy of it. He writes that he was not motivated by ulterior motives, because he considered himself greater than the earlier Kabbalists, or because he felt that no one else would ever reveal it if not for him. Instead, he wrote, he did so for two reasons, one theological and one human. The theological reason is related to the final redemption, for which these mysteries are necessary, while the human reason is due to the lack of Kabbalah masters in his generation. Abulafia was very much aware that criticism would be directed at him because of his revelations. He had already been persecuted by the Rashba, and was shunned by other Kabbalists for revealing their mysteries. He writes that the mysteries involving the letters were revealed to the prophets, and they, in turn, revealed them to all Israel. Since it was almost forgotten, it is important to write it down. He concludes, "Even though I know that people will denounce both me and my books, I will not desist from writing." All this was not mere words. In a letter to Abraham Comte of Messina, Abulafia indicates that he had already written 26 books on the mysteries and 22 prophetic books. Even these numbers are significant, since 26 is the numerical value of the Tetragrammaton, while 22 is the number of letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Abulafia's prophetic books were those written while he was in a quasi-prophetic meditative state. In at least one place, he clearly states that such a book was written after he had meditated. The only surviving example of these prophetic books is his Book of the Sign, sefirot, which is also one of the very few of his books that was ever published. It is written in a style that attempts to mimic that of the biblical prophets, and tells about his mystical experiences. Most of his other books are guides to meditation or expositions of the Kabbalah, often involving long strings of numerically related words or phrases. With a few very minor exceptions, none of Abulafia's works were ever printed. Even those that were not published until relatively recently, and then by secular scholars or historians. Still, his writings did enjoy a fair degree of circulation in the mystical community, and a considerable number of manuscripts survive, both in libraries and in private collections. 4. Teachings. In the literature, there is considerable discussion regarding the term Kabbalah or Kabbalah. Most authorities state that it comes from the root kabal, meaning to receive. Abulafia takes this a step further, maintaining that a mystic is called a Kabbalist because he has received, kibel, the tradition from either the prophets or those who received from them. Like most other Kabbalists, he saw his tradition as being that of the prophets, and assumed that his methods were the same as those that the prophets used to attain their high mystical experience. The use of divine names plays a very important role in Abulafia's system. This is one tradition that he clearly saw as being derived from the patriarchs and prophets. Thus, when the Torah states that Abraham called in the name of God, Genesis chapter 12, verse 8, most commentaries interpret this to mean that he prayed, or that he proclaimed God's greatness. Together with a number of other Kabbalists, however, Abulafia takes this literally, stating that Abraham actually pronounced God's name, and through this practice was able to attain the highest mystical levels. The Sefer Yetzirah, which is attributed to Abraham, seems to support this interpretation. It states, "When Abraham gazed, he looked, saw, probed, and understood. He graved, chakak, hewed, chatzav, and combined, tzaraf. He was successful, and the Master of all, blessed be He, revealed Himself to him." The three key words here are graved, chakak, hewed, chatzav, and combined, tzaraf. According to a number of Kabbalists, these processes involve the manipulation of letters, and it is from this that Abulafia derived his main system. Over 100 years before Abulafia, a major commentator, Rabbi Yehuda ben Barzilai of Barcelona, had explained that the word graved, chakak, denotes writing. He also stated that hewed, chatzav, denoted the formation of the letters, while combined, tzaraf, indicated that Abraham permuted them. In one of his books, Abulafia virtually paraphrases this interpretation, and it was apparently well known among the Kabbalists. Thus, the method used by Abraham, as outlined in the Sefer Yetzirah, was primarily one of writing and permuting the letters of the alphabet. This activity served as a meditative method, through which he reached high prophetic states. This is also the core of Abulafia's system. He calls it the Kabbalah of letters, distinguishing it from the Kabbalah of sefirot. Another important Talmudic teaching, often quoted by Abulafia, is the statement that Bezalel knew how to permute, tzaraf, the letters, with which the heaven and earth were created. Bezalel was the one who was given the task of erecting the tabernacle in the desert after the Exodus. Through this mystical ability to manipulate the letters of creation, he was able to build it in such a manner that it would act as a channel for the spiritual energies of creation. Very closely related to this is the fact that all of creation took place by means of sayings. At each stage in the creation of the universe, the Bible introduces the account by stating, "And God said." Creation therefore took place through words. These words, however, consisted of letters, and therefore, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet are the most basic building blocks of creation. Therefore, if an individual knows how to correctly manipulate the letters of the alphabet, he is able to make use of the same spiritual forces that originally brought the universe into being. Abulafia finds a hint for this in the verse, "God's way is perfect," tamim. God's word is permuted, tzerufah. Psalm 18, verse 31. Although the word tzerufah in this verse is usually interpreted to mean refined or purified, Abulafia used it in the sense of the Sefer Yetzirah, where it means blended or permuted. This is also indicated by the word tamim, which indicates a spiritual experience and a state of enlightenment. Elsewhere, Abulafia states that the permutation of the letters itself serves as a test and a refining for the initiate. Through the manner in which an individual permutes the letters, one can know the nature of his innermost self. Here we see an entirely new method of meditation. Instead of chanting a word over and over, as in mantra meditation, one writes a word, permuting and cycling the letters in every possible manner. As the initiate progresses to higher and higher states, he no longer needs to actually write the letters, but can permute them verbally or mentally. All this is an initiation to the higher levels, which actually involve the divine names. An entire handbook dealing with the various methods of manipulating letters in this manner is attributed to Abulafia, and similar books were written by other members of his school. A similar word with two meanings is rachav, which means to ride, but also has a connotation of grafting and attaching. This is especially significant since rachav is the root of the word merkavah, which denotes the highest mystical experiences. As Abulafia points out, this also has the connotation of grafting and combining, and therefore the mystery of the Merkavah, involved the combination of letters, words, and divine names. Abulafia thus discusses the phrase, one who looks at the gazing, sefirot, of the Merkavah. He states that the meaning of this was known to the sages by a tradition from the prophets, and consisted of grafting, harkavah, of one letter to another, one word to another, one divine name to another. Each such Merkavah combination combines the power of the divine names, the sefirot, and the letters. When these influence an individual, they direct him in forming every possible permutation. Because their essence is sealed in these permutations, every key of wisdom is given over to the individual who gazes, sees, and understands. When an individual looks into these permutations in a proper manner, he can see all of creation. He is like a person looking into a glass mirror, who sees both his own face and the faces of all who pass by. Abulafia writes that, when the power of the influx begins to manifest and reveal itself to the one gazing into the mirror, the letters and sefirot begin to appear before him, like lightning flashes. This is like the version of the Chayot, regarding which it is written, the Chayot ran and returned, like a vision of lightning. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 14. This is also the meaning of what the Sefer Yetzirah says, 10 sefirot of nothingness. Their vision, tzefiyah, is like a flash of lightning. The word vision, tzefiyah here, is a term that has a special connotation of prophecy and the mystical vision. Although Abulafia considered the method of sefirot to be different than the method of letters that he taught, he does occasionally speak in guarded tones about ascending through the ladder of the sefirot. Still, he was very careful not to stress this method. He realized that if one meditated on the sefirot, it would be very easy to see them as independent entities, thus introducing an element of plurality into the absolute unity of the godly realm. This, in turn, can lead to the actual worship of the sefirot, and according to at least one Kabbalistic source, this was the first step that eventually led to pagan polytheism. Another type of meditation that Abulafia hints at is contemplation. He particularly speaks about this with respect to the blue thread in the tzitzit, the ritual tassel worn on the prayer shawl, talit. Speaking of the tzitzit, the Torah says, "You shall gaze at it, and remember all of God's commandments." Numbers chapter 15, verse 39. The Talmud expounds on this, saying, "The blue thread resembles the sea resembles the firmament, and the firmament resembles the throne of glory." What the Talmud is actually doing is alluding to the fact that this thread is to be used as an object of meditative contemplation, outlining the steps of spiritual ascent. This thread was colored with a blue dye taken from the chilazon, a mollusk related to the murex. Abulafia notes that the word chilazon has the same letters as la chazon, meaning for a vision. Through this dye, one could attain a vision approaching that of prophecy. Still, Abulafia's main method involved the permutation of letters, and, on a higher level, pronouncing the letters of the divine names. Such pronunciation was to be accompanied by specific head motions, as well as particular breathing exercises. The true mystical experience is beyond description, and cannot be explained to one who has not experienced it himself. Just as a person who has been blind from birth cannot comprehend the concept of color, so one who has been spiritually blind cannot grasp the brilliant spectrum of the spiritual world. Abulafia thus writes, "One who reaches the highest level cannot reveal it to anyone. All he can do is give over the keys, so that the enlightened individual can open the gates, which are sealed to exclude the unworthy." Both the opportunities and dangers facing one who enters the mysteries are graphically described by Abulafia. He writes that divine wisdom has both a right side and a left side. This mystery is the highest level, since it teaches the individual how to attain true enlightenment. But still, even if one makes use of all the necessary techniques, He cannot attain the higher levels unless he is properly prepared for this. Abulafia writes that many great men and sages have stumbled and fell, were trapped and snared, because they exceeded the bounds of their knowledge. Abulafia then continues, speaking of the highest level, which is the crown. The word for crown is keter, and Abulafia notes that when these letters are reversed, they spell karet, which means cut off. Thus, when an individual attempts to reach the highest level of the crown, if he is not worthy, he can end up being cut off spiritually. Abulafia therefore warns in the strongest terms that one who attempts to enter these mysteries must be adequately prepared, and that one not enter unless he is thoroughly familiar with all the necessary introductions. An especially strong warning is given against spiritual dilettantism. If a person enters the mysteries as a whim, without preparation, he can be destroyed, both spiritually and psychologically. In pronouncing this warning, Abulafia writes to the uninitiated, "Your mind will be confused, your thoughts confounded, and you will not find any way to escape the reveries of your mind. The power of your imagination will overwhelm you, making you imagine many utterly useless fantasies. Your imaginative faculty will grow stronger, weakening your intellect, until your reveries cast you into a great sea. You will not have the wisdom ever to escape from it, and will therefore drown." He warns that before one attempts to attain the small, still voice, he must first grasp the mysteries of the Kabbalah with his intellect. The ultimate mysteries are alluded to by the Garden of Eden. The Torah relates that after Adam sinned and was expelled, this garden was protected by the flame of a rotating sword. Genesis chapter 3, verse 24. Abulafia explains that the manner in which this sword rotates depends on the readiness of the individual attempting to enter. If he is worthy, it becomes the mirror through which he perceives, while if he is not worthy, he is burned out and cut off by the fire of this sword. The one who oversees the sword, preventing the unworthy from entering, is the angel Metatron. The turning sword itself is the cycle of the intellect. Abulafia writes that the letters used by the initiate are engraved on the cycle of the intellect, and it is through this cycle that one perceives the transcendental. The source of his vision is the holy palace, which is the precise center of that cycle. The sphere of the intellect has the power to travel through the spiritual realm, which is the realm of pure intellect. As one begins to enter this realm, he can climb the revolving sphere of the intellect as if it were a ladder. When he actually ascends, his thought processes are turned over and his entire perception is altered, so that he retains nothing of his normal mental state. Entering such a state of consciousness can be extremely dangerous. Abulafia writes that one must completely alter his nature and personality, transporting himself from a state of feeling to one of intellect, from the path of the imagination to one of burning fire. Otherwise, he will ultimately find his visions altered, his thought processes demolished, and his reveries confounded. The sphere is what refines and tests, and regarding it, the scripture states, "A refinery, mitzaref, is for silver, a furnace is for gold, but God tries the heart." Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3. Abulafia goes on to state that God gave us the Torah, teaching us the way of permutations, and the steps of the ladder involving the mystery of letters. Without such information, it is impossible to reach the level of knowing God. He explains that the higher one ascends, the more barriers must be sundered. Speaking at length of these barriers, he discusses the biblical passages which appear to indicate that God is hidden by gloom and cloud. Since God is infinite, it is impossible for anything to encompass him. But this gloom and cloud is actually in the human intellect, which cannot actually perceive God. While one must break through the barriers, one must also be careful not to enter too close. One who goes beyond the proper boundary can be swallowed up by the light and die of rapture, very much like Ben Azai. According to Abulafia and other Kabbalists, this was the death known as the kiss of God, which, according to the Talmud, was reserved for the greatest saints. One method of avoiding this is to bind one's own soul with an oath that it not leave the body. But even more important, one must constantly avert his gaze, going back and forth. This is the meaning of what the Sefer Yetzirah teaches. 10 sefirot of nothingness. Close your mouth, that it not speak of them, and your heart, that it not think. And if your heart runs, return to its place. It is thus written, the Chayot ran and returned. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 14. Regarding this, a covenant has been made. Abulafia maintained that when an individual is on the highest meditative levels, he can actually alter the laws of nature through sheer spiritual force. Still, he was generally very much opposed to using these powers for such a purpose, seeing their main goal as being spiritual enlightenment and not mere magic tricks. In a number of places, he graphically describes the magical techniques of the practical Kabbalah, denouncing them in no uncertain terms. The best time for the deepest levels of meditation is in old age, when the intellect is well developed and the pull of the body is weak. Although young people may try to enter the mysteries, Abulafia taught that they will not reach the higher levels until they are advanced in age. This reflects the Talmudic teaching that such mysteries should not be taught to an individual unless he is halfway through his years. Highly controversial was Abulafia's claim to have attained true prophecy, even though he did not live in the Holy Land. According to the Midrash, prophecy can only be attained in the Holy Land, and not any place else, except under sharply restricted conditions. Abulafia refused to accept this literally, and said that the Holy Land discussed in this teaching referred to a specific spiritual level. If an individual reached this level, he could attain prophecy no matter what his geographical location. 5. The Hidden Eden. Many types of meditation involve the repetition or chanting of certain words and phrases. In Abulafia's system, however, writing also plays a very important role. Rather than recite various letter combinations, the initiate was to write them down. An especially effective technique was to take a word and permute its letters in every possible way. From this, the initiate would proceed to manipulate the word in other ways, making use of various ciphers and numerical values of the letters. This is alluded to in the Sefer Yetzirah, which speaks of the number of ways in which various words can be permuted. Thus, a word containing 3 letters has 6 permutations, one containing 4 has 24, one containing 5 has 120, and a word with 6 letters has 720 permutations. There is a special technique known as cycling, galgal, through which one permutes the letters of a word in a prescribed manner. Writing in this manner is a type of meditation, where one makes use of both the path of the body and that of the intellect. Another important reason for the effectiveness of this method is the fact that the letters are the very essence of creation, and therefore, when one writes and permutes them, he can channel these forces into his spiritual being. Abulafia notes that dio, the Hebrew word for ink, has the same letters as yud, the initial letter of the tetragrammaton, and the substance of the spiritual realm. The ink with which one writes is therefore the substance of his spiritual experience, from which all else follows. Abulafia wrote much about the permutation and combination of letters, devoting his entire Sefer Hatziruf, Book of Blendings, to the subject. There, however, he writes very little regarding the actual method in which one makes use of such permutations. There is, however, one place where Abulafia goes into this at length, and this is in his Otsar Eden Haganuz, Treasury of the Hidden Eden. An excerpt from Otsar Eden Haganuz, Treasury of the Hidden Eden. I have explained what you need to do this, and you lack nothing. Take the pen, parchment, and ink, and write the letters, permuting them in such a manner as to denote good. Depart from evil, do good, seek peace and pursue it. Psalm 34, verse 15. These things cannot be known unless one knows the name. It is written, every word of God is permuted, tziruf. He is a shield to those who take refuge in him. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 5. This teaches that true knowledge depends on God's sayings, which must be permuted and tested through such permutation. It is the permutation of letters that tests these things, as it is written, a permuter, mitzaref, for silver, a furnace for gold, but God tests the heart. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3. The way of permutations, tziruf, is the closest way to truly know God, more so than any other way. The individual who wishes to enter the way of permutations should immediately test and purify his heart with the great fire, which is the fire of darkness. If one has the power to endure the way of rebuke with great passion, and if his mind can control its fantasies, then he can ride his mind like a horse. He can control it as he desires, spurring it on to go forward or reining it to stop where he pleases. At all times, his imagination remains subject to his will, not straying from its authority, even by a hair-breadth. A person with this power is truly a mighty warrior. He is like Uriel, who constantly gazes at the light of God, delighting in God's mysteries. Now, I will tell you the mystery of the true discipline, through which you can alter the laws of nature. This is the path along which you must travel to attain the mystery of true discipline. Take in your hand a scribe's pen. Write speedily, letting your tongue utter the words with a pleasant melody very slowly. Understand the words that leave your lips. The words can consist of anything that you desire, in any language that you desire, for you must return all languages to their original substance. I have alluded to this elsewhere, but this is its correct place. You already know that Isaiah said, "Declare the letters backward, and then we will know that you are gods, that you can do good and evil, and we will meditate, nishta'ah, from sha'ah, and see together." Isaiah chapter 41, verse 23. He also said in God's name, "Ask me of letters, and command me over my sons, and the work of my hands." Isaiah chapter 45, verse 11. Again he said in God's name, "Tell me of the letters that will come." Isaiah chapter 44, verse 7. These three verses are trusted witnesses to the power of the letters. Take the pen in your hand, like a spear in the hand of a warrior. When you think of something, uttering it in your heart with specific letters, also express it with your mouth. Listen carefully, and watch what emanates from your lips. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 24. Let your ears hear what your lips speak, and with your heart, understand the meaning of all these expressions. Write each expression down immediately. Manipulate the letters, and seek out other words having the same numerical value, even if they do not follow my path. And know that this will be your key to open the 50 gates of wisdom. You must be alone when you do this. Meditate, hitboded, in a state of rapture, so as to receive the divine influx, which will bring your mind from potential to action. Permute the letters back and forth, and in this manner you will reach the first level. As a result of the activity and your concentration on the letters, your mind will become bound to them. The hairs on your head will stand on end and tremble. Your lifeblood is in your heart, and regarding this it is written, "The blood is the soul." Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 23. It is likewise written, "The blood in the soul will atone." Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. This blood within you will begin to vibrate because of the living permutations that loosen it. Your entire body will then begin to tremble, and all your limbs will be seized with shuddering. You will experience the terror of God, and will be enveloped with fear of Him. You will then feel as if an additional spirit is within you, arousing you and strengthening you, passing through your entire body and giving you pleasure. It will seem as you have been anointed with perfumed oil from head to foot. You will rejoice and have great pleasure. You will experience ecstasy and trembling. Ecstasy for the soul and trembling for the body. This is like a rider who races a horse. The rider rejoices and is ecstatic, while the horse trembles under him. There will be no question that through this wondrous method, you will have reached one of the 50 gates of understanding. This is the lowest gate, but once you have entered this gate, you are protected from the gatekeeper, whose name is Az, Aleph Zayin. Regarding this gatekeeper, it is written, "God acquired me wisdom at the beginning of His way, the first of His works from Oz." Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22. This is the mystery of the beginning of His way. The divine presence will then rest on you, and the 50 gates of understanding will be opened in your heart. From then on, you will realize who is with you, who is over your head, and who is in your heart. You will then recognize the true way. 6. Light of the intellect. Once one has mastered the technique of letter permutation, the next step in Abulafia's system involves the pronunciation of the various names of God. The simplest of these involves the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yud and He and Vav and He. These letters are combined with the letter Aleph, together with the 5 primary vowels. This method is presented in detail in Abulafia's Or HaSechel, Light of the Intellect, and it is one of the very few cases where his meditative techniques have found their way into a standard published Kabbalah classic. This entire selection is presented by the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, in his Pardes Rimonim, Orchard of Pomegranates, one of the most important of all Kabbalah classics. In this selection, however, the Ramak does not attribute this method to Abulafia, but rather to an obscure Sefer HaNikud, Book of Dots. While there are a number of books with this name, none of them are known to speak of this method. Several of these books have been lost and are only known because they are mentioned in other texts, the most important being attributed to Rabbi Aaron of Baghdad, a Kabbalist of the 9th century. It is entirely possible that both Abulafia and the Ramak are actually quoting from a much older text known as Sefer HaNikud, and this is supported by the manner in which it appears in Abulafia's manuscripts. It is equally possible, however, that only this small portion was copied, and that it was generally called Sefer HaNikud. In any case, it is well established that the Ramak was familiar with Abulafia's system. Techniques very similar to those presented here are also discussed by other Kabbalists, even by opponents of Abulafia, such as Rabbi Judah Haidt. It is also most interesting to note that a very similar method is prescribed for the creation of a golem. Briefly, the system of Or HaSechel involves the combination of the 4 letters of God's name, Yud and He and Vav and He, with the letter Aleph, and then cycling it through the 5 basic vowels. These vowels are Cholam, having the sound of O, Kamatz, having the sound of A, Tsere, having the sound of E, Chirik, having the sound of I, Shuruk, having the sound of U. Together with each pronunciation, one must move his head in a motion resembling the actual form of each vowel. At the same time, one must breathe in a specific manner, with a certain number of breaths permitted between letters, and more between lines. An excerpt from The Light of the Intellect. It is known that the consonant letters do not have any sound by themselves. God therefore gave the mouth the power to express the letters, pronouncing them as they are found in a book. For this purpose, he provided vowel points for the letters, indicating the sound with which they must be expressed when they are translated from a book to the mouth. These vowels are what allow the letters to be sounded, and they can also be written as letters in a book. The vibrations of these sounds must also be associated with space. No vibration can occur except in a definite time and place. The elements of space are the dimensions and distances. The elements of time are the cycles through which it is measured. This includes such divisions as years, months, and days. One must therefore know how to draw out the sound of each letter as it is related to these dimensions. This is the mystery of how to pronounce the glorious name. Make yourself right. Meditate, hitboded, in a special place, where your voice cannot be heard by others. Cleanse your heart and soul of all other thoughts in the world. Imagine that at this time, your soul is separating itself from your body, and that you are leaving the physical world behind, so that you enter the future world, which is the source of all life distributed to the living. The future world is the intellect, which is the source of all wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, emanating from the King of Kings, the Blessed Holy One. All creatures fear him with a great awe. This is the fear of one who actually perceives, and it is double the fear of one who merely has experienced love or awe. Your mind must then come to join his mind, which gives you the power to think. Your mind must divest itself of all other thoughts other than his thought. This becomes like a partner, joining you to him through his glorious, awesome name. You must therefore know precisely how to pronounce the name. Its form is given in the tables. This is the technique. When you begin to pronounce the aleph with any vowel, it is expressing the mystery of unity, yichud. You must therefore draw it out in one breath and no more. Do not interrupt this breath in any manner whatsoever until you have completed the pronunciation of the aleph. Draw out this breath as long as you extend a single breath. At the same time, chant the aleph, or whatever other letter you are pronouncing, while depicting the form of the vowel point. The first vowel is the cholam above the letter. When you begin to pronounce it, direct your face toward the east, not looking up or down. You should be sitting, wearing clean, pure white robes over all your clothing, or else wearing your prayer shawl, talit, over your head, and crowned with your tefillin. You must face the east, since it is from that direction that light emanates to the world. With each of the 25 letter pairs, you must move your head properly. When you pronounce the cholam, begin facing directly east. Purify your thoughts, and as you exhale, raise your head little by little, until when you finish, your head is facing upward. After you finish, prostrate yourself on the ground. Do not interrupt between the breath associated with the aleph and the breath associated with the other letter in the pair. You may, however, take a single breath, and it may be long or short. Between each pair of letters, you may take 2 breaths without making a sound, but not more than 2. If you wish to take less than 2 breaths, you may do so. After you finish each row, you may take 5 breaths, but no more. If you wish to take less, you may do so. If you change anything or make any mistake in the order in any row, go back to the beginning of the row. Continue until you pronounce it correctly. Just like you face upward when pronouncing the cholam, face downward when you pronounce the chirik. In this manner, you draw down the supernal power and bind it to yourself. When you pronounce the shuruk, do not move your head upward or downward. Instead, move it straight forward, neither lowering or raising it. When you pronounce the tsere, move your head from left to right. When you pronounce the kamats, move it from right to left. In any case, if you see any image before you, prostrate yourself before it immediately. If you hear a voice, loud or soft, and wish to understand what it is saying, immediately respond and say, "Speak, my Lord, for your servant is listening." 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 9. Do not speak at all, but incline your ear to hear what is being said to you. If you feel great terror and cannot bear it, prostrate yourself immediately, even in the middle of pronouncing a letter. If you do not see or hear anything, do not use this technique again all that week. It is good to pronounce this once each week, in a form that runs and returns, for regarding this, a covenant has been made. What can I add? What I have written is clear, and if you are wise, you will understand the entire technique. If you feel that your mind is unstable, that your knowledge of Kabbalah is insufficient, or that your thoughts are bound to the vanities of the time, do not dare to pronounce the name, lest you sin all the more. Between the tablet of the Yud and that of the Hey, you can take 25 breaths, but not more. But you must not make any interruption at this time, not with speech and not with thought. The same is true between the Hey and the Vav, and between the Vav and the final Hey. But if you wish to take less than 25 breaths, you may do so. 7. Life of the Future World. Of all Abulafia's books, the one that explains his methods most completely is his Chaye Olam Haba, Life of the Future World. This was well known to the Kabbalists, and in the unpublished 4th section of his Sha'arei Kedusha, Gates of Holiness, Rabbi Chaim Vital speaks of it as being the most important guide for attaining meditative enlightenment. To this day, Chaye Olam Haba is known to Kabbalists, and it exists in many manuscripts, both in libraries and in private collections. While its methods are considered to be very highly advanced, there are still some closed Kabbalistic circles that actually make use of them. The main method discussed in Chaye Olam Haba is very similar to that found in Or HaSechel, also involving the same head motions as well as controlled breathing. Instead of making use of the Tetragrammaton, however, this book utilizes the name of 72 combinations. This name was known from most ancient times and is discussed in both the Bahir and the Zohar, but significantly not in the Hechalot. By the 11th century, it had been popularized in Rashi's commentaries and is also mentioned in a late Midrash. But while the name itself was known earlier, the actual methods of its use had never been written down until Abulafia did so. The name of 72 is derived from 3 very interesting verses, Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 through 21, reproduced next. Counting the letters of these 3 verses, one immediately discovers that each one contains exactly 72 letters. These verses then form the basis for the 72 triplets in the name. The process of constructing the name is outlined in the Bahir and is very straightforward. One takes the letters of the first verse in direct order, those of the second in reverse order, and those of the third verse in direct order. Thus, one begins with the first letter of the first verse, which is a vav. Then one takes the last letter of the middle verse, which is a he, and finally, the first letter of the third verse, which is a vav. Combining these, one obtains the first triplet, vav and he and vav. In order to construct the second triplet, one proceeds in a similar manner. One takes the second letter, yud, of the first verse, the second letter from the end of the middle verse, lamed, and the second letter of the last verse, yud. This results in the second triplet, yud and lamed and yud. One then continues in this manner until all 72 triplets are completed. Derivation of the name of 72. The three verses. Exodus chapter 14, verses 19 through 21. Vayisa malach ha'elokim, ha'holech lifnei machane Yisrael, vayelech me'acharehem, vayisa amud ha'anan mipneihem, v'ya'amod me'acharehem. And the angel of God, who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and went behind them. Vayavo ben machane Mitzrayim uven machane Yisrael, vayhi ha'anan ve'achoshech, vaya'er et halayla. Velo karav ze el ze kol halayla. And it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and cloud and darkness were there. Yet it gave light in the night, and one did not come near the other all that night. Vayet Moshe et yado al hayam, vayolech Hashem et hayam beruach kadim azah kol halayla, vayasem et hayam lecharava, vayibak'u hamayim. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and God caused the sea to go back with a strong east wind all the night, and it made the sea into dry land, and the waters were parted. This, however, only provides the consonants of the names. The vowels used when pronouncing the name are the natural vowels associated with each consonant. Abulafia explains that the natural vowel is the first vowel found in the letter's own name. Thus, for example, the first vowel in the name of the letter bet is e, and therefore e, or the tsere, is the natural vowels of the bet. Similarly, the first vowel in gimel is e, and hence e, or chirik, is the natural vowel for gimel. The same is true of all the other letters. In general, Chaye Olam Haba is a book that speaks most eloquently for itself. The selection cited here should provide an adequate overview of the use of the name of 72. An excerpt from Life of the Future World. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. Prepare yourself, unify your heart, and purify your body. Choose a special place for yourself, where your voice will not be heard by anyone else. Meditate, hitboded, alone, with no one else present. Sit in one place, in a room or attic. Do not reveal your secret to anyone. If you engaged in this by day, do so in a darkened room. It is best, however, that you do it at night. At this time, when you prepare yourself to speak to your Creator, and you desire to witness His might, be careful to cleanse your thoughts of all worldly folly. Wrap yourself in your talit. If the time is proper, also place your tefillin on your head and arm. This will increase your awe and trembling before the divine presence, which will visit you at this time. Wear clean clothing. If possible, all your clothing should be white. This is of great help for one's concentration on fear and love of God. If it is at night, light many candles so that your eyes are well illuminated. Then, take in your hand a tablet and some ink. These will serve as your witnesses that you are coming to serve God with joy and good heart. Then, begin to permute a number of letters. You may use only a few, or you may use many. Transpose and permute them quickly until your heart is warmed as a result of these permutations, their motions, and what is derived from these permutations. As a result of these permutations, your heart will become extremely warm. From the permutations, you will gain new knowledge that you never learned from human traditions nor derived from intellectual analysis. When you experience this, you are prepared to receive the influx, shefa. The influx will then come, bestowed to you. It will arouse in you many words, one after the other. Then, prepare your inner thoughts to depict God and His highest angels. Depict them in your heart as if they were human beings, sitting or standing around you. You are in their midst, like a messenger whom the king and his servants wish to send on a mission. You are ready to hear the words of the message, whether it is from the king or from one of his servants, from his mouth or from the mouth of any one of them. After you have depicted all this, prepare your heart and mind, so that your thoughts should understand the many things that come to you through the letters that your heart imagines. Understand each concept and its reasons, both as a whole and in its parts. Ponder them, like a person who has a parable or example revealed in a dream, or like one who delves into a very deep concept in a book of wisdom. Take each concept that you hear and interpret it with the best and closest interpretation that you can. Judge yourself according to what you understand from it. And what you are told can also relate to others. All this will take place after you have cast the tablet from your hand and the pen from between your fingers, or after they have fallen of their own accord because of your many thoughts. The divine influx will begin to prevail in you and will weaken your external and internal organs. Your entire body will begin to tremble until you think that you are about to die. This is because your soul is separating itself from your body as a result of the great joy that you experience when you perceive and recognize these things. In your mind, you will then choose death rather than life, for death only involves the body, and as a result, the soul lives forever when it is resurrected. You then know that you have reached a level where you are receiving the divine influx. At that time, you may wish to honor the glorious name and serve Him with the life of your body and soul. Conceal your face and be afraid to gaze upon God. Do not come closer. Remove your shoes from your feet, for the place upon which you stand is holy ground. Exodus chapter 3, verse 5. Instead, involve yourself with your body once again. Stand up, eat something, drink something, smell a pleasant fragrance, and let your spirit once again return to its sheath. Let your heart rejoice with its portion, and know that God loves you. He teaches you for your benefit. He teaches man knowledge. After you have done this successfully many times, you will become an expert in choosing life. When you are strong and stable, you can make use of another, higher method. When attempting this method, prepare yourself in the manner discussed earlier. Clear your mind completely. Then, with complete concentration and with a proper, pleasant, sweet melody, pronounce the name of 72. Using the natural vowels of each letter, begin by pronouncing these 6 triplets. Vaheva, Yolayo, Sayote, Alame, Meheshi, Lalahe. These 6 triplets of the holy name pronounce with 18 breaths. If the divine influx does not force you to stop, continue pronouncing the name in this manner until you reach the triplet Mem, Vav, Mem, the last of the 72. We have a tradition that the divine influx will come to a perfected individual after he completes the number of letters in the first verse, that is, after he pronounces 24 triplets. This is alluded to in the word my beloved, Dodi. Dodi equals 24. It is thus written, the sound of my beloved, Dodi, knocking. Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 2. You may then see the image of a child, Na'ar. Na'ar equals 320, or that of a sheikh. Sheikh equals 320. In Arabic, the word sheikh means an elder. You see the image of an old man, zaken, since the numerical value of Na'ar is the same as elder and elder, zaken vizaken. Zaken vizaken equals 320. The mystical name of the one who appears to you is Metatron, whose name is also Na'ar. His name is also Enoch, Chanoch. This is alluded to in the verse, train, Chanoch, a child, Na'ar, in this way, and when he is old, Zaken, he will not depart from it. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Combine raise, Chanoch, Chanoch equals 84, and his way, Darko, Darko equals 230, and you will discover his mystery. Thus, our way is his strength, Darkenu Kocho, equals 314. Likewise, our strength is his way, Kochenu Darko, equals 314. The numerical value of Metatron is 315. When you see him, strengthen your heart and understand his ways. Take heed of him and hearken to his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he will not forgive your sin, for my name is in him. Exodus chapter 23, verse 21. Behold God's name, Shaddai. Shaddai equals 314. This is Metatron. He is the Prince of Names, Sar Hashemot, who speaks with the authority of the name, Reshut Hashem. Both expressions contain the same letters. These 24 triplets contain 72 letters. Therefore, when he speaks, respond and say, Speak, my Lord, for your servant, Avdecha, is listening. 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 9. Both of these numbers are alluded to in the word Avdecha, which can be broken into Av equals 72, and Decha equals 24. The angel who teaches you the mystery of God and his name is Gabriel. He speaks out of the first verse, Pasuk, of the holy name that is pronounced by your mouth, and he provides you with a vision, Mar'eh, of prophecy. This is the mystery of the verse, I make myself known to him in a vision, Mar'eh. I speak to him in a dream, Chalom. Numbers chapter 12, verse 6. A vision, Mar'eh equals 246, is the mystery of the verse, Pasuk. Pasuk equals 246. This is Gabriel. Gabriel equals 246. A dream, Chalom equals 84, is the mystery of my witness, Edi equals 84. This is Enoch. Chanoch Hanoch equals 84. And now also my witness, AD, is in heaven, and he who testifies for me is on high, Job chapter 16 verse 19, that this Kabbalah tradition is true. If, heaven forbid, you do not receive anything when you pronounce the first verse, start again and begin the second verse. Pronounce the second set of triplets. Nucha-he, He'a-a, Yoreta, Shia-he, Re-yo-yo, Avame. Concentrate as much as you can. As you pronounce each letter, exhale while you sound out the accompanying vowel together with its proper motion. There are only 5 vowels, and their order is O, A, E, I, U. The exhalation for all of them is the same. The name contains 21 different letters. These are all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, except for the Gimel, which is lacking. The letters having the first vowel, Cholam, are Yud and Kuf. The letters containing the second vowel, Kamatz, are Aleph, Daled, Vav, Zayin, Chaf, Lamed, Samech, Ain, Tzadi, and Tav. They are 10 in all. The letters containing the third vowel, Tzere, are Bet, He, Chet, Tet, Mem, Pe, and Resh. There are 7 in all. The letter containing the fourth special vowel, Chirik, is Shin. This is the only such letter in the name. There is one other letter that has the vowel Shuruk to itself, and this is the Nun. There is also another letter, Gimel, that shares the vowel Chirik with the Shin. But although it is found in the alphabet and in books, it does not exist in the name, because of a reason already discussed elsewhere. As you begin to pronounce each letter, begin to move your heart and your head. Since your heart is internal, move it mentally. But your head is external, and therefore, you must move it physically. Move your head following the actual form of the vowel point associated with the letter that you are pronouncing. This is the form of the head motions. The vowel point written above the letter is called Cholam. This is the only vowel point above the letter, since all the others are written beneath the letter. When you pronounce the Cholam together with the letters Yud or Kuf, begin facing directly straight ahead. Do not incline your head to the right or left, upward or downward. Keep your head straight and even, like the balance of a scale, just as it would be if you were speaking face to face to a person of the same height as yourself. Then, as you draw out the sound of the letter while you pronounce it, begin to move your head so as to face upward toward the sky. Close your eyes, open your mouth, and let the words shine. Clear your throat of all phlegm, so that it should not disturb your pronunciation. As you exhale, continue to raise your head at the same rate, so that you complete the exhalation and head motion simultaneously. If you complete the head motion before exhalation, do not lower your head until you have exhaled completely. Between each letter, you may rest and prepare yourself. At this time, you can take as many as 3 breaths, like those associated with the pronunciation. Each triplet will therefore involve 12 breaths. The mystery of these 12 breaths, Yud Bet Neshimot, Yud Bet Neshimot equals 818, is the 72 names, Ein Bet Shemot. Ein Bet Shemot equals 818. The following phrases each equal 818. These are bound until they raise a change in nature. through names when they build, in the calculation of attributes, which are hey, hey, beneath the name. The following phrases each equal 828. However, the mystery of all the letters depends on 22 breaths, which are under the glory. Furthermore, their parts are tripled, and they parallel the 72 sefirot, which in man are 72 thoughts. But the 12 breaths, the following phrases each equal 818, whose mystery is the 72 names, are the seal of the Satan. The Satan, plus an additional unit for the word itself, adds up to 365, the days of the year. For this mystery, we must pronounce the 12 months. The reason for this is that the word for month, chodesh equals 312, is equal to 12 divine names, Yud and He and Vav and He, which equals 26. 12 times 26 equals 312. This is for the sinners in Israel, whose bodies are judged in Gehinnom for 12 months. And 2 houses, triplets, contain 12 breaths. Their mystery is Vav Vav, that is 6 and 6, as I alluded to in the 72 names that are pronounced. These breaths give rise to a third triplet, and this gives a total of 18, meaning life, chai. The following phrases each equal 824. They will increase for you years of life, which are 18 breaths, from the 2 chayot, in which there is the life force of breath. The following phrases each equal 678. You have 2 nostrils, whose mystery is the heaven called Aravot. Understand this, for these are the nostrils of the soul, and their mystery is 2 cherubs, which make the divine presence descend. The divine presence then dwells on earth, speaking to man from above the ark cover, from between the 2 cherubs. Exodus chapter 25, verse 22. The following phrases each equal 805. For the primeval substance is on the ark cover, like the form of the rainbow. The 2 cherubs allude to the divine presence, Hashchinah. Hashchinah equals 390. They are cause and effect, male and female, Zachar u'Nekeva. Zachar u'Nekeva equals 390. They were therefore forged miksheh, as a single body with 2 forms. They look at each other, and the name was between them. All of this was like a tree on the ark cover, and because of the rainbow, Hakeshet, the following phrases each equal 445, it had to be forged, miksheh. These are the overseers over the name, which is the name of the category out of which comes every soul. And now, the sorcerer depends on these techniques, and therefore every soul is a witch. The Torah, however, says, "Do not let a witch live," Exodus chapter 22, verse 17. This means that every soul shall not live. Regarding the vengeance against the wicked, God therefore commanded, "Do not let every soul live." Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 16. The following phrases each equal 410. However, the breath, which is from the second one, is a holy tabernacle in the heart. One ascends with the unique name to the sky to depict with unifications the relationship between everything that is difficult in this science of pronunciation. It alone is life in the name. It is remembered and sealed in the book of life to make the individual live with passion, which enlightens the soul constantly, when every thought, Every soul is concentrated on it. Therefore, one who pronounces the name so as to always live with it is serving God with love, and all the reward is His alone. In His wisdom, this is what God desired. The vowel point, which is called kamatz, looks like a line with a dot below it. When you pronounce it with one of the 10 associated letters, chant the letter, and move your head from left to right in a straight line, as if to trace the top of this vowel point. Then bring your head back so that you are facing directly forward toward the east, since you are facing this direction when you pronounce the name. This practice must be done while one faces the east, just as in the case of formal worship. Conclude by bowing down slightly, so as to parallel the dot beneath the line of the kamatz. Complete the exhalation and head movement simultaneously, as I instructed you by the first vowel. The next vowel is the tsere, which looks like 2 dots next to each other, one to the right and one to the left. As you pronounce it with one of its 7 associated letters, begin the pronunciation and the motion simultaneously. Move your head from right to left, the reverse of what you did with the kamatz. When you pronounce the shin, you will make use of the chirik, which has the form of a single dot below the letter. As you pronounce it, move your head downward, as if you were bowing down to God, who is standing before you, and to whom you are speaking. This is the precise opposite of the head motion associated with the cholam. With these 4 vowels, you have crowned God as king over the 4 directions. When you pronounce a nun, also make him king. Begin by looking straight ahead, stretching your neck forward as much as you can. Do not raise or lower your head, but keep it facing straight forward. This is the form of the shuruk. It consists of 3 dots, one under the other, forming a diagonal line. It can also be a single dot in the center of and adjacent to a vav. Both cases imply the same thing. Through these 5 vowels, you have crowned God as king in all 6 directions of the universe. These are up and down with O and E, right and left with the A and E, and backward and forward with the U. These vowels are often written together with their associated letters. They all add up to 42. All the vowels, therefore, point to the fact that they are in God's hand, Biyad Hashem. Biyad Hashem equals 42. This is alluded to in the verse, "Let us fall in God's hand, for His mercies are great. But let me not fall into the hand of man." 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 14. Their mystery is God, equals 42. My only one, 42. In them, 42. My heart, 42. Will be worthy, 42. And this mystery is enough, 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 which equals 42. And if, heaven forbid, when you pronounce these 2 verses, you still do not receive the divine influx, speech, or a visible vision of a man or some other prophetic vision, start again and begin the 3rd verse. This is its form. Vaheva, Danuyo, Hecheshi, Ameme, Nunua, Nuyota. When you complete the entire name and receive from it whatever God wishes to grant you, praise God and thank Him. If you are not successful in attaining what you have sought from God, you must realize that you must repent completely. Cry because of your lack of elevation and because you pronounced the name with ulterior motives, which is an extraordinary sin. You have not been fit to receive God's blessing. In the Torah, God promised that he would bless us with his name, as it is written, "In every place where, Asher, I will pronounce my name, I will come to you and will bless you." Exodus chapter 20, verse 21. God is saying, I will pronounce my name when you pronounce my name. The word where, Asher, in this verse, has the same letters as Rosh, the word for head. The mystery indicated here is that one must pronounce the name with his head, as I have taught you. The priest blesses the people with the name, and he himself is also blessed. Every priest who does not bless is himself not blessed. With all this, my son, despise not the rebuke of God, and do not spurn his correction. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11. Wait a while, and then make another attempt to pronounce his fearsome name, until you are worthy of something. You may also attempt to use one of the 10 names of God used in the Bible. God says, I will come to you and bless you. And the numerical value of I will come, avo, is 10. All of this may also be a test. God may be testing you to see whether you will deny him or will still have faith. So be careful and guard your soul, lest you see any iniquity or unfairness in God. If it is empty, it is from you. This completes the entire Kabbalah tradition regarding the pronunciation of the name. If you accustom yourself to do it, you will be successful and will attain enlightenment. 8. Gates of Righteousness. Although Abulafia presents an excellent overview of his methods, he does not fit them together into a single system, nor does he discuss the form of his experiences in any detail. This is left to an anonymous disciple, author of Sha'arei Tzion, Gates of Righteousness, a book that was most probably written in the year 1295 in Hebron. A clue to the identity of the author is provided in another manuscript, which indicates that the author's name was Shem Tov. As mentioned earlier, Abulafia had a disciple by the name of Shem Tov of Borgus, and it is highly probable that he is the author of this book. There is very little question that the master mentioned in this book is none other than Abulafia himself, and for the most part, the material here appears to parallel that in other works by Abulafia. Most important, however, is an autobiographical sketch, where the author speaks of his experience with Abulafia, describing his initial skepticism and ultimate enlightenment. We will not include this here, however, since it has already been published elsewhere in English. Numerous copies of this book were made, and it exerted an important influence on the later Kabbalists of the Holy Land. Almost an entire chapter was copied 200 years later in the main work of Rabbi Judah Albertini, whom we shall discuss in the next section. Another important Kabbalah text, Shoshan Sodot, Rows of Mysteries, actually quotes it by name. The author speaks of 3 ways through which one can divest himself of the physical: the common way, the philosophical way, and the Kabbalistic way. The common way involves a method called erasure, mechika, where one attempts to erase all images from the mind. The author notes that he was aware that the Muslim Sufis also made use of this technique, and that one method involved the repeated chanting of the name Allah. Although the Sufis are able to attain a degree of ecstasy in this manner, the author writes that they cannot know its significance, since they are not party to the Kabbalah tradition. Discussing the philosophical way, the author speaks of a certain philosopher by the name of Ben Sina, who wrote many volumes while in a state of meditation, hitbodedut. When an idea was particularly difficult, he would concentrate on it and ponder it, often drinking a cup of strong wine, enabling him to sleep on it. This is of particular interest, since a very similar procedure is also discussed by Rabbi Isaac of Akko, and this is one indication that the two shared a common tradition. It is in discussing the way of Kabbalah that the author mentions his master, who is identified as Abulafia. The master spent 4 months teaching him the methods of letter permutations, telling him to erase everything from his mind. Finally, he told him, "The goal is not to stop at any finite form, even though it is of the highest order. Through the way of divine names, one can reach a level where the power is not under his control. The more incomprehensible the names, the greater is their advantage." The master then showed him books composed of utterly incomprehensible names and number combinations, saying, "This is the path of names." The author spent 2 months deeply meditating on these, and finally, one night, he awoke to see a light shining from his face. At first, he did not believe what he was seeing, but no matter where he walked in the dark, this light followed him, even when he hid under a blanket. He was aware that this was something that could not be explained in any natural manner. Upon informing the master of this experience, the author was told to spend half his time permuting letters, and half making use of the divine names. One night, while permuting the letters of the name of 72, he began to see the letters expanding before his eyes, growing until they looked like great mountains. His hair stood on end, and he began to speak automatically, saying words of wisdom. On a later occasion, the author made use of a technique involving the tetragrammaton. At first, he felt as if he would die, but after saying a sincere prayer, he suddenly felt as if he were being anointed with oil from head to toe. He then felt a tremendous spiritual experience, which he speaks of as indescribable sweetness of rapture and ecstasy. An excerpt from The Rose of Mysteries. The power of the prophets to liken a form to its creator is a very great mystery. I found an ancient teaching that explains this, and I will write it down here. These are the author's words. The following was told to me by the enlightened sage, Rabbi Nathan of blessed memory. When an individual completely enters the mystery of prophecy, he suddenly sees his own image standing before him. He becomes totally unaware of his own essence, as if it were concealed from him. Then he sees his own image standing before him, speaking to him and telling him of the future. It is regarding this mystery that our sages say, "Great is the power of the prophets, since they liken a form to its creator." Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra likewise taught, "He who hears is a man, and he who speaks is a man." Regarding this, another sage writes, "Through letter combinations and meditation, hitbodedut, I had a number of experiences. One involved a light that followed me wherever I went, as I discussed in Sha'arei Tzedek, Gates of Righteousness. However, I was never worthy of attaining a level where I could see my own image standing in front of me." Still another sage writes, "I am aware how insignificant I am, and I realize that I am certainly not a prophet or a disciple of the prophets. I have neither attained Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit, nor have I made use of a heavenly voice, Bat Kol. Of such things I have not been worthy, for I have not divested myself of my cloak or washed my feet. But I call heaven and earth as my witnesses that this account is true. One day, I was sitting and writing mysteries in the manner of truth. Suddenly, it was as if I had ceased to exist. I then saw my own image standing in front of me. As a result of this, I was forced to stop writing." In his commentary on the Guide to the Perplexed, Rabbi Moshe of Narbonne writes, "When the sages teach that the prophets liken a form to its creator, they mean that they liken the form which is in the prophet's own soul to its creator, that is, to God. It is thus written, 'Over the form of the throne there was a form like an image of a man.' Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 26. These forms and images exist in the soul of the prophet. This also happened to us when we were writing this book. Once, in the late afternoon, we were placing the vowel points on the explicit name. All at once, our eyes were confronted with visions, appearing like definite forms made of red fire. This occurred a number of times while we were writing this book." 9. The Ladder of Ascent. The teachings of Abulafia are known to have come to the Holy Land through the author of Shaarei Tzedek, and it appears that they took firm root there. Over 200 years later, we find one of the prominent sages of the Holy Land, a chief rabbi of Jerusalem, involved in these mysteries and authoring an important book on Abulafia's teachings. This is none other than Rabbi Judah Albertini, author of Sulam Ha'aliyah, Ladder of Ascent. Albertini is known to Talmudic scholars as the author of a super commentary on Maimonides' commentary on the Mishnah. This was published by Rabbi Shlomo Idni, author of another important commentary on the Mishnah. Written in 1501, this super commentary is included in the most important edition of the Mishnah. Not as well known is Albertini's monumental commentary on Maimonides' Code, which exists only in manuscript. Not too much is known of the personal life of Albertini, other than the fact that his father, Moshe Albertini, was a prominent scholar in Lisbon. It is highly probable that the family was exiled in 1496, during the general expulsion of Jews from Portugal. This is significant, since Rabbi Judah Haidt, a strong opponent of Abulafia's teachings, also left Portugal during this same expulsion. The fact that Haidt found it necessary to denounce Abulafia's writings indicates that they enjoyed a degree of popularity in his homeland. Albertini migrated to the Holy Land, and by 1509, we find him as a member of the Jerusalem Academy, where he signed an ordinance exempting scholars from the head tax. He succeeded Rabbi Jacob of Triel as head of the Jerusalem Academy, making him the official head of all the rabbis of Jerusalem. It would appear that Abulafia's school of meditative Kabbalah was sufficiently accepted in Jerusalem at the time that a practitioner and teacher of these methods could be chosen as a chief rabbi. A short time later, we find another teacher of these methods, Rabbi Joseph Tzayach, also holding a rabbinical post in Jerusalem. A manuscript of Sulam Ha'aliyah was in the hands of the great Kabbalist, Rabbi Sassoon Bechor Moshe Preciado, and from what he writes, he actually intended to publish it. Although he never succeeded in doing so, a number of key chapters have been published in scholarly journals. Several manuscripts of this book exist, both in libraries and in private collections. In this book, Albertini speaks about the meditative Kabbalists, Mekubalim Hamitbodedim, as if they were a well-established group in his time. Speaking about other books on the subject of letter manipulation, Seruf, that had recently been written, he warns that they contain many errors. He is thoroughly familiar with Abulafia's system, upon many of whose teachings he expands, presenting them in a clear and well-ordered manner. In 2 places, he mentions Abulafia's Chaye Olam Haba, Life of the Future World, by name. The first few chapters of the book deal mostly with word and letter manipulation, Tzeruf, drawing heavily on Abulafia's works. Because this involves the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, it is virtually impossible to do justice to this method in English. The individual interested in pursuing the subject further can find an excellent summary in the published works of the Ramak. Another idea that Albertini discusses in detail is that of jumping, kfitza, and skipping, dilug. Although this is mentioned by Abulafia, and the method was undoubtedly used by him, he does not present a clear picture how one makes use of it. Albertini not only clearly describes these techniques within Abulafia's system of tzeruf, but he also provides a number of examples showing how they are used. Briefly, skipping consists of a sort of free association, using any one of the standard methods of letter manipulation. This can consist of simple letter permutation, the use of ciphers, or finding other words with similar numerical values, gematria. Words can also be expanded in a number of ways, the simplest being to spell out different letters of the word. As long as one is making use of a single system, such as gematria for example, he is said to be skipping. When he goes from one system of letter manipulation to another, then he is said to be jumping. All of this was seen as an important meditative technique through which one could attain a high level of enlightenment. An important prerequisite for attaining the meditative experience is Stoicism, hishtavut, and this is discussed at great length by Albertini. This has been discussed by a number of later Kabbalists, but Abulafia only speaks about it in passing, writing, "One who has attained true passion, cheshek, is not influenced by the blessings or curses of others. It is as if they were speaking in a language that he does not understand." Albertini's teachings regarding Stoicism, however, seems to come from Rabbi Isaac of Akko, who speaks of this idea at length. This is of particular significance, since it would indicate that Albertini was a student of Rabbi Isaac of Akko, as well as of Abulafia. Albertini also expands on Abulafia's discussion of hewing, chatziva, and engraving, chakika, mentioned in the Sefer Yetzirah. When a person reaches a high meditative level, quote, "the mind is no longer concealed in the prison of the physical faculties, and it emerges, entering the spiritual domain," end quote. In this domain, the individual may see various visions or letter combinations, and the connotation of hewing is that he splits and analyzes these visions while still in a meditative state. Engraving then implies that he engraves these revelations in his soul so that they are never forgotten. Although Albertini speaks of a number of standard meditative techniques, Albertini maintained that any proper teaching could serve as the subject of one's meditation. He thus writes, "Those who meditate, hitboded, concentrate on an idea or on a very deep lesson. They close their eyes and virtually nullify all their faculties in order to allow their hidden intellect to emerge from potential to action. They then absorb the lesson, permanently engraving it in their soul." Through the use of divine names in meditation, one can channel extremely powerful spiritual forces. Albertini writes that Moses made use of this to save Israel, and that, with the power of the divine names, which he pronounced in his prayers, he was able to turn back the anger and fury. More remarkable, he states that the 10 martyrs could have saved themselves by using these names, and that the sages could have even prevented the destruction of Jerusalem at the hand of the Babylonians and Romans. But seeing that this had been God's decree, they refrained from doing anything. The Talmud speaks of 3 oaths that Israel made not to improperly hasten the coming of the Messiah. This is based on the verse, "I bind you by an oath, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not awaken, that you not arouse the love, until it is desired." Song of Songs, chapter 3, verse 5. There has been much discussion of this oath, and some rabbis have even used it as a refutation of Zionism. Albertini provides a very novel interpretation of this oath, saying that the great masters of Kabbalah meditation were bound by an oath not to use their methods to hasten the redemption. He thus writes, "Even though the coming of the Messiah is a great concept, necessary for the rectification of all universes, the sages and saints who knew the mystery of God's name were bound by an oath not to arouse the redemption until they knew that God desired that it should occur." In general, Albertini warns against pronouncing any of the divine names, even those discussed by Abulafia. Anticipating the Ari, he understands that while earlier generations may have been able to purify themselves sufficiently so that they could actually pronounce the names, later generations are no longer able to do this. But still, he maintains that it is not actually necessary to pronounce the names, and that much can be accomplished by merely knowing them and pondering their significance. This is evidenced from the verse, "He was enraptured in me. I will bring him forth. I will raise him up, because he knew my name." Psalm 91, verse 14. Albertini notes that the verse does not say, "He pronounces my name," but rather it says, "He knows my name." He concludes, "From this we see that the main thing is the knowledge of the divine names, of their existence, essence, and meaning." A similar explanation is also provided to the verse, "Before they call, I will answer them." Isaiah chapter 65, verse 24. Even though one concentrates on a given name and only thinks about it, without calling and actually pronouncing it, he will be answered.